Every time someone says the words good and evil in a prayer, in a film, in a political speech, in a bedtime story about heroes and villains, they are using an idea that somebody invented, not discovered, invented. Before that invention, most of the ancient world worked with a very different framework. The universe was full of many gods, some helpful and some destructive, and human beings navigated between them through ritual and sacrifice. There was no single cosmic battle between light and darkness. There was no final judgment. There was no heaven and hell. Then one man, living somewhere in ancient Persia or Central Asia, at some point between 1500 BCE and 600 BCE, in a time so distant that scholars still cannot agree on when he existed, had a vision by a river. And out of that vision came an idea so powerful that it restructured the entire moral imaginations of the Middle East, flowed directly into Judaism, then into Christianity, then into Islam, and has been shaping human thought ever since. Most of the people whose thinking was shaped by this idea has never heard his name. His name was Zarathustra. Here is the first honest thing to say about Zarathustra. We know almost nothing about him with certainty. His birth date is one of the most debated questions in the history of religion. Scholars have placed him anywhere from 1700 BCE to 600 BCE, a range of over 1,000 years. Even his homeland is uncertain. Tradition places him in what is now northwestern Iran or the steppes of Central Asia, but the geographic evidence is inconclusive. While some scholars suggest he lived from approximately 628 to 551 BCE based on later Avesta texts, others argue, citing earlier texts and evidence, that he lived sometime during the second millennium BCE. What we have is his voice, preserved in a set of hymns called the Gathas, written in an ancient language called Old Avestan, which forms the oldest part of the Zoroastrian holy text, the Avesta. The Gathas are almost certainly Zarathustra's own compositions. They are written in the first person. They describe specific events in his life, and their language is so archaic that scholars regard them as genuinely ancient. Everything else in the Avesta, the laws, the cosmology, the rituals, accumulated around these original hymns over centuries and even millennia. Zoroaster is generally accepted as an authentic historical figure, but the period in which he lived remains unclear. Many scholarly estimates place him circa 1200 BCE, making him a candidate to be the founder of the earliest religion based on a revealed scripture. What the Gathas tell us about the life is fragmentary but vivid. He was born into a priestly family. His father's name was Paurushaspa, his mother's Dugdova. His name Zarathustra means in Old Avestan something like possessing old camels or having golden camels, a name that suggests a pastoral society where camels were a measure of wealth. He grew up in a world dominated by polytheism and animal sacrifice, where priests performed elaborate rituals to placate a large number of competing divine powers. He rejected most of it. According to Zoroastrianism tradition, the great transformation in Zarathustra's life came when he was 30 years old, a number that recurs in the founding stories of several world religions, which may or may not be coincidence. He had gone at dawn to fetch water from a river, a routine act in a world where clean water required daily collection. On the river bank before him, a celestial entity appeared in bright light, calling himself Vohu Mana, good purpose, and telling Zarathustra that he had been sent by Ahura Mazda himself to deliver a message of vital importance. The religion of the people as it was being practiced was in error. There were not many gods requiring different types of sacrifice, but only one god, Ahura Mazda, who was not interested in animal sacrifice but in moral behavior. This was a radical claim in its historical context. The world around Zarathustra worshipped many gods, Daiva, a class of divine beings that Zarathustra came to regard not as gods to be worshipped, but as destructive spirits to be rejected. He elevated one being above all others, Ahura Mazda, the wise Lord, the creator of all that was good. And against Ahura Mazda, he placed an opposing force, Angramayu, the destructive spirit, the embodiment of evil, darkness, and death. According to Zarathustra, Ahura Mazda created the universe and the cosmic order that he maintains. He created the twin spirits Spenta Mayu and Angra Mayu, the former beneficent, choosing truth, light, and life, and the latter destructive, choosing deceit, darkness, and death. The struggle of the spirits against each other makes up the history of the world and is reflected in the choice between good and evil that humanity constantly faces. This is the invention, not the existence of evil. People had always understood that terrible things happened, but the framing of all of existence as a cosmic moral battle between two opposing principles, in which every human being participates through every choice they make, this was new. This was the idea that would travel across millennia and reshape the moral imaginations of half the world. After the vision, Zarathustra began preaching, and for approximately 12 years, almost nobody listened. Zarathustra tried to find acceptance for his beliefs for about 12 years. Frustrated, he finally left his community and took refuge in Bactria. In the text of Yasna, within the Avesta, he commented with sorrow on his departure from his home. To what land should I turn? The resistance was understandable. He was attacking the existing religious establishment directly, telling priests and their animal sacrifices were worthless, that the many gods they served were actually evil spirits, that the entire ritual structure through which they maintained their social authority was built on a lie. Priests do not generally welcome this kind of message. Neither do the communities that have organized their lives around the rituals those priests perform. He was not merely proposing a new theology, he was proposing a new kind of ethics, one that placed moral choice at the center of human life in a way it had not been before. The famous Zoroastrian formulation that emerged from his teaching, good thoughts, good words, good deeds, was not a simple platitude. It was a revolutionary claim that what matters to the divine is not the sacrifice you perform, but the quality of your inner life and your actions in the world. Ahura Mazda tells him that the first perfection is good thoughts, then good words, and finally good deeds. Those who love the light are righteous, says Ahura Mazda, and those who love darkness are not. After 12 years of wandering and rejection, he finally found a patron, King Vishtaspa, a powerful ruler who, after a series of theological debates at his court, converted to Zarathustra's religion and used his political authority to spread it. With royal backing, the faith expanded rapidly across his kingdom. Zarathustra spent his remaining years at Vishtaspa's court, composing the Gathas and establishing the religious community that would eventually become Zoroastrianism. He died, according to tradition, at 77. The manner of his death recorded differently across different sources. Some traditions say he was murdered at the altar while performing a religious ceremony. Zoroastrianism became the official religion of the Persian Achaemenid Empire, the empire of Cyrus the Great, Darius, and Xerxes, one of the most powerful political entities the ancient world produced. Through that empire, Zoroastrian ideas came into direct contact with Jewish communities during the Babylonian exile in the 6th century BCE. This contact is where the story becomes historically significant in a way that most people have never been told. The period of Jewish exile in Babylon coincided precisely with Persian imperial dominance, and scholars have documented significant parallels between Zoroastrian theological concepts and ideas that appear in Jewish scripture from this period and afterward. The concept of Satan, a single personified force of evil opposing God, is not prominent in the oldest parts of the Hebrew Bible. It becomes much more prominent in texts written during and after the Babylonian exile. The ideas of a final judgment, of resurrections, of heaven and hell, as distinct destinations for the righteous and the wicked, of a cosmic battle between good and evil that will end with a final victory of the good. All of these appear in Zoroastrianism centuries before they appear in the forms most familiar from Jewish, Christian, and Islamic traditions. Scholars debate the degree of direct influence versus parallel development. It is a contested area of religious history. What is not seriously contested is that Zoroastrianism predated these traditions and contained these ideas, and that there was extensive contact between Zoroastrianism, Persian civilization, and the communities that produced Judaism, and through Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Zoroastrianism introduced concepts such as judgment after death, heaven, and hell. If that influence is even partially what scholars suggest it might be, then the ideas of heaven and hell, of Satan, of a final cosmic judgment between good and evil that billions of people carry as fundamental features of their worldview, trace back, at least in part, to one man's visions on a river bank in ancient Persia, a man most of those billions have never heard of. Zoroastrianism flourished under the Persian, Achaemenid, and later Sassanid empires, lasting as a major world religion for over 1,000 years. When the Arab Muslim armies conquered Persia in the 7th century CE, Zoroastrianism faced persecution that nearly destroyed it. The Muslim Arab destroyed Zoroastrian shrines, fire temples, and libraries, burning scores of Persian works in an effort to subjugate the people and impose their religion. The Avesta and commentaries were saved by the Parsis, those who fled the region for India, or by those who remained and kept the text hidden. The Parsis, Zoroastrians who fled to India, primarily to Gujarat, preserved the religion in a diaspora community that still exists today. Their community in India, small but historically significant, maintains Zoroastrian practice, texts, and traditions across more than 13 centuries of displacement. Today, Zoroastrianism has perhaps 100 to 200,000 adherents worldwide, a tiny fraction of what it once was, and a tiny fraction of the religions whose ideas it helped shape. The faith that may have given Judaism, Christianity, and Islam some of their most fundamental concepts survives as a minority religion, kept alive by the Parsi community in India and small communities in Iran and across the diaspora. Nietzsche borrowed Zarathustra's name for his famous philosophical work, Thus Spake Zarathustra, not because Nietzsche agreed with Zoroastrian theology, but because he admired the historical Zarathustra as someone who had been courageous enough to create a new moral framework from scratch. Nietzsche's Zarathustra and the historical one have almost nothing in common, which is one more reason the real man deserves the conversations on his own terms, not through the lens of a 19th century German philosopher who used his name as a literary device. He lived, whenever he lived, in a world that had no concept of the cosmic battle between good and evil that shapes the modern imaginations of billions of people today. He introduced that concept. He named the forces. He said, history is a struggle, you are in it, and your choices matter to the outcome. Three of the world's major religions have carried versions of that idea for thousands of years. Almost none of their followers know his name. In the next episode, Human Lens moves to medieval Persia, to a philosopher who tried to prove the soul's existence through a thoughtful experiment that anticipated modern philosophy by 600 years, and whose medical encyclopedia was used in European universities for 5 centuries. If you want the stories of the thinkers history forgot to credit, please subscribe. There's a lot more still to uncover.